My job, I think, is to just give you an overview of the issue that we're talking about. I'm actually going to, I'm on a lapel mic, I'm going to swap over to the other side of the stage, leap over Tim's feet. As I said, I have written a book called A Greedy Man in a Hungry World. The issue is not just that we have 7 billion people on the planet now rising to 9 billion, and that we need, by one of the great figures that's given out, that we need to produce 50% more food on the same or less amount of land by 2030. It's the kind of people we have. We have seen a massive explosion in the aspirations of many people around the world. At the beginning of the century, at the beginning of this century, the 21st century, between 12 and 14% of the world's middle classes were in Asia. By 2050, that number is likely to be somewhere north of 60, perhaps up to 68%. And the middle classes, they want to eat like us. It's absolutely outrageous, isn't it? Here are some numbers. In 1975, the Chinese ate 10 kilograms of meat per person a year. That has risen now to 45 kilos and is expected by 2030 to go to 69 kilos. By comparison, America at its peak was eating 84 kilos of meat per head, and it's now dropping down. And there are 1.3 billion Chinese. So you can see the impact that sort of consumption is going to have on the environment, because, as I know, Ed will probably talk about meat and its impact on the environment. What does that mean for us over here? I'm going to have a quick flick. One of the issues for us in Britain is that we are part of a global commodified environment. For many, many years, the British supermarkets thought that they could just shop on the global, in the global supermarket. In 2006, the Cabinet Office came up with a report on food security and said it really wasn't an issue for a country like Britain because we could just buy our way out of it. It was called nicknamed the Leave It to Tesco report in many, many quarters. But many things have changed, and now, for example, the Chinese are willing to pay for ungraded, unpacked apples what the British supermarkets are prepared to pay for graded and packed. As I say, food has become distinctly commodified. Let me show you a slightly difficult graph to look at. This is a graph of the daily price of wheat. I'm going to try and work there it is. See up there, that's a price spike in 2008, which was caused by multiple occurrences. There were cyclones in Bangladesh, there were droughts in Australia. Biofuel policies had really kicked in the American Midwest. About 36% of the corn crop was going into bioethanol, one of the stupidest ideas in human history. So there was a squeeze on supply and also a rise in demand, which led to a price spike. I think it's very interesting, though, if you look over here, right at the far end, that was 2012, and prices were already rising back up again. This next one is, there's your 2012 price spike on soya, and that was it last year. It went above and beyond. We ask ourselves, what does this mean for us? What do price spikes and commodification of food and demand mean? We're used to abundance. Is abundance a thing we can be certain of? And what does food security mean? Well, I think it's fair to say that food security issues can actually be the undoing of governments. We're all aware of the Arab Spring, and we think of it perhaps as a spontaneous rising up and demand for democracy. And yes, obviously there is some of that, though anybody who has followed events in the Middle East, North African countries will know that very little of the hard sought for democracy has actually been realized. Why did it happen? This is an interesting question. The MENA countries, Middle East, North Africa, have always historically been food insecure. They didn't produce enough, and so they had to import a lot of it, and to keep prices down, it was government subsidized. And then we saw that there was a food price spike in 2008, and by 2010 it was hard to keep those prices down. And you can actually track many of the events of the Arab Spring against food price rises across the world and the way that it unfurled. 2008 itself resulted in riots across the world and a number of deaths. Now this is a picture of me looking a bit like Hagrid in Rwanda. Massive commodification of food also has implications for bits of Africa as well. We know that there is a problem of chronic child malnourishment around the world. 2.6 million children under 5 die of conditions where there was an underlying condition of chronic malnourishment. They didn't survive diseases like malaria or pneumonia that they could have survived, or it leads to stunting. which is where they are 10 to 15% reduced in physical growth or intellectual capacity. Rwanda, where this picture was taken, has about 40% stunting among its kids, which has implications for the economic development of the country thereafter. These kids are fine. But one of the issues when you see prices going up in the marketplace is it actually hits the markets in Africa as well. And your subsistence farmer may decide that it's actually worth selling their crop into the market to get a bit of cash, maybe for good reasons. Maybe they want to buy a kerosene lamp for their kids so they can carry on working after dark. But they still have to feed them. So what do they end up feeding them on? Well, it could be cassava root. That's a very, very common thing, which has calories but is nutritionally very, very poor. The implications of this across the globe, of food security as a major issue, of demand leading to price rises, are massive. And what about here? Well, I think it's fair to say that we cannot assume a completely secure food supply anymore. There was a great line came out of the House of Lords a little while ago that we are only 9 meals away from anarchy. Point being that we live in a just-in-time culture where our food comes in just as we need it. We used to have 50 to 60 days wheat supply in the country, and now it's a minimal supply. What would it take? How many pinch points would it take to kick in for the supermarket shelves to start going empty and for people to start going hungry? And how long would it take after that for civil strife? That, in a way, is the landscape of tonight's event. It's the subject that all of our speakers will be talking about.